The Huskers grabbed momentum early on and ran with it, literally. Hi, I'm Aaron Muller, and this is episode 10 of the Cobsmacked Podcast. This is a Nebraska football podcast where we cover the Huskers season and team news as it progresses throughout the year. Every video episode is uploaded to YouTube, and the audio versions can be found on Apple, Google, and Spotify. If you enjoy the content, please consider leaving a like and following wherever you're listening. It really helps out. So we're going to get into the recap of the Week 5 game against the Northwestern Wildcats. I just have a big smiley face as my first note because I was in such a good place last night. It was a great game, finally. It was the one we've been waiting for. It was the one that the fan base needed. It was a big win for the Huskers, players, coaches, and the fan base. We felt as a whole, I think as a whole fan base, whether you were disappointed or you were excited for the future, you felt like we were almost to the point where we could see around the corner. We were just turning the corner. It just took 3 weeks to do it. It was the slowest corner turn I've ever seen in my life. But now that we see what's over there, we're like, oh, why did we wait so long? Let's get over there. Frost mentioned going into the game that it was the most confident that he's been going into a game. You would think that having a close game with Oklahoma, having a close game with Michigan State, and coming away with both of those with losses, it might start playing into the psyche of the team. But he said that's not the case at all. He's like, the fact that we were hanging with them, that we should have won those games, has just given the team more confidence. He said the team was more confident now at this point in the year than they were at the beginning, before we even played Illinois. He said the fact that we were able to hang in all these games, that we should have played better, and we could have won if it weren't for a few key plays. That's just built on the confidence of the team. And that showed. The Huskers scored the most points that they have since we joined the Big Ten. We scored 56. The score was 56-7. That 49-point margin of victory was also the largest margin of victory that we've had in the Big Ten as well. So we played a full game of football, offense, defense, and special teams, even though it was limited. Everything was great. Everything worked fine. The engine was running on all cylinders, as people say, I guess. I'm not a car guy. Sorry. We're going to get into stats. I am a stat guy. So Nebraska, we had 230 passing yards on 21 attempts. They had 256 passing yards on 40 attempts. Rushing with the ball, we had a whopping 427 on the ground on 53 attempts. We were running the ball, and we were running it hard, which was kind of the flip that you've seen from Northwestern. They have typically come into the games, and they've been running the ball. But Helinski came in, and he was throwing the ball well, I might add. But rushing the ball, they had issues with. So they only got 37 total rushing yards on the night on 26 carries. So total, we had 657 total yards, and they had 293. So again, it was a good performance by the defense to hold another team to not only 400, but under 300 yards of total offense. And the 657 is a high mark. I believe that's the highest mark that we've had in the Big Ten as well for total yards. Defensively, we had 4 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, 0 interceptions, and we did recover 1 of 3 fumbles that went on the ground. On their side, they had 0 sacks. So our offensive line, we'll get into the changes. I'm super excited about that. But the offensive line allowed 0 sacks, and not only that, they allowed 0 hits on the quarterback. The quarterback never got touched unless he was scrambling, unless it was a design scramble. Other than that, we had 2 tackles for loss that we gave up to their defense, but that's still not terrible. 2 tackles for loss in a whole game is not terrible at all. We didn't give any interceptions, and we didn't lose any fumbles. We did have a fumble, but it went out of bounds. So we'll get into that a little later too. But the special teams, so we kicked 0 field goals in total. They kicked 0 field goals in total. I was kind of wondering, like, how often does that happen in a Big Ten game, especially in a series like this one between Nebraska and Northwestern, where we typically it goes down to a field goal or a touchdown at the end of the game. Nobody even attempted a field goal, let alone made one. We only punted the ball 1 time. We could have punted it twice, but we went for it on a 4th down, and people were making comments and jokes that Scott Frost is doing everything in his power to avoid the punting unit tonight. I don't think that was the case. I just feel like we were in a good spot on the field that whether we went for it or we lost it, like it was not giving them great field position, and he trusted the defense. But we did punt it once from almost our entire end zone, like our heels were on the end zone, and he punted at 84 yards. Pristup punted at 84 yards. It rolled 20 of that, but that doesn't matter. That's the 84-yard average for punts on the night. That's incredible comparing it to the 7-yard punt that we had last week. Going on their side, they punted it for six times and for 43.5 yards on average. First downs, we had 28. They had 17. Time of possession was fairly even at 34 minutes compared to their almost 26 minutes. I know that the seconds don't add up, but I'm just rounding off here. Penalties, we had a great night on penalties. We had 4 for 19 yards. That's not terrible. And Northwestern had a out-of-character night for them as far as penalties go. They had 6 for 53, and some of those were pretty big. I remember one that sticks out in my mind is a intentional grounding penalty that Helinski threw. He didn't get it back to the line of scrimmage. Scott was waiting for the call, and Pat Fitzgerald freaked out when it happened, but it didn't get back to the line when you watch the replays. So that's not something you typically see from Northwestern. They're known for their defense, and they're known for their discipline, and both of those things were kind of sketchy tonight. And I mentioned that going into the game that Northwestern's not who they typically are. They're having a down year. I believe someone pulled up the stat that they have the most transfers out of their program of any big Power 5 school. They got hit the hardest. And so I have opinions on the transfer portal, but Northwestern specifically got hit really hard with that. But we're going to stay positive. So going into the takeaways, the offensive line is going to get all of the praise from me to begin with. They're typically the ones that get the most criticism. They're the ones that get the most, I don't know how to say that. They're going to get the most credit for our losses, blame for our losses. I give them a lot of criticism because I know that they can play so much better. It wasn't that we don't have the size, we don't have the strength. It was that the technique wasn't right, or they weren't playing aggressively. I'm not sure what it was that was causing them to play poorly. But Frost mentioned coming into the week on Monday that there was going to be some things switching up. There was going to be a switch up on the line, and it seemed to work. People have been associating it with different things, so we'll add to the list. So coming into the night, the team arrived, all of them arrived in suits. Everybody looked super sharp. Cam Jurgens had his black cowboy hat on, but it looked nice. I was impressed with those guys. I'm sure a lot of them haven't even worn a suit before, but they looked good. All of them did. It was a unity thing. I believe the basketball team is doing the same thing. But it's supposed to add the team unity and image. Did that help with the offensive line? Maybe. Dominic Raiola, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. He was an O-lineman from 98 to 2000. He came in and spoke to the team before the game started, specifically the offensive line. Did that help? Who knows? The TO merch drop. People are associating that with it. They said Scott Frost is wearing Tom Osborne merch tonight, and that seems to be embodying, the game itself. I don't think it has anything to do with any of those things. Maybe the former lineman coming in and talking to the line because there is so many young guys, maybe that kind of fired them up. But I think maybe they just opened it up to guys that were willing to fight, not so much that they had the experience, but they wanted to fight, to play on the field. And so we put them out there, and they seemed to play really well. Going through the starting positions, we had Teddy Prohaska. I predicted he would come in and play somewhere because he has just been so adamant that he gets on the field and he makes a difference, and he did. He came in at the left tackle position. He's a true freshman. We put him in at a few tight end spots during the year so far. It doesn't look like we're going to redshirt him at this point anymore. I mean, once he played like he did last night, he was the best graded lineman we had last night as a redshirt freshman. Cam Jurgens has typically had that honor every game past this. Teddy Prohaska comes in as a redshirt freshman at left tackle, and first start hits the highest note there. Left guard, we had Nuili. I'm not sure how to pronounce his first name. I don't want to butcher it. I believe he's originally from Germany, but I think that's how you pronounce his last name, Nuili. He's a sophomore, so we have a true freshman on left tackle, sophomore at left guard, sophomore at center, junior at right guard, and another freshman at right tackle. Jurgens stayed at center, Matt Sichterman stayed at right guard, and then they moved Turner Cochran out to right tackle. I've been pretty hard on Turner Cochran being not the greatest pass defender, but his ability to play the tackle position. I believe this is the first game he's played at that right tackle position. seems to fit him really well. He's going to, I mean, he's a freshman anyway. I'm not going to rag on, and I say this every time. I always kind of put it with an asterisk saying that, yes, I'm being very critical, but they're all young. I mentioned that there's only one junior on the team. The rest of them are sophomores or freshmen or true freshmen. That's impressive that they played that well with that many young guys. And Nwili and Prochaska, they both came into the game and they were talking like they were running with the second team. So they have a little bit of chemistry there anyway. And the fact that they're both on the left side, they're right next to each other, that might play into it as well. They have a little more chemistry together. So when they come in on the line together, that helps out. Austin Allen and Travis Vokalek came in and they played a huge role in the run blocks as tight ends. So the line and the tight end blocking that we had last night was incredible. I was just so happy. The whole game, I was just like, this is all it literally took for the offense to spark. And that's how I've been saying it. I was like, this offense shows so many points of potential that if the offensive line could just hold a block for a little longer or make the hole a little bigger or give the running backs a crease to run through, we would be a completely different team. And you've seen that tonight. Just the spark that the offensive line gave everybody on the offense. Like, wide receivers could get open. The quarterbacks could sit back and wait for the wide receivers to develop the routes. The running backs had holes to run through. You could see them visibly on the TV. It wasn't just like a little gap that Ramir Johnson has to squeeze his body through, which was a good thing because Yant came in and he's not a little man. Not that he needs a little hole. He could bust one open if he needed to. But they're not perfect. I'm not going to say they're perfect, but the upside that they gave to pass protection and creating the holes and creating the creases that they needed, there was a lot of movement off the ball, which is what Scott Frost wanted. He wanted the nastiness, as he mentioned last week, that he wanted the nastiness to be able to push off the ball. As soon as that ball snapped, get movement up front. And they were constantly pushing guys back into the linebackers, and that was a big deal. There was no penalties until halfway through the third quarter, and when they started rotating in, the second string, third string guys. Bryce Benhart was the guy that had a false start, but it wasn't a huge deal. At that point, we were already really far ahead. They were just giving these guys experience, trying to get them in the game. Maybe that's what we need. I mean, that was a game we needed where we needed to bring in some guys that aren't typically going to get experience to get them ready for these bigger games that are coming up. But like I mentioned, the offensive line allowed 0 sacks and 0 hits on the quarterback. That makes such a difference when your quarterback can trust you to give him time and space to throw the ball. Like I mentioned, the difference that it made was night and day. That's probably my biggest reason to smile from this game is the offensive line improved drastically in a week. I'm not saying they're perfect. They're going to have a really big competition coming up here with Michigan. But we're not going to talk about that. We're going to focus on the fact that they were able to come in and do what the last 5 games have not been able to do. They've been able to move the ball consistently, make holes, and protect Adrian. That's all they needed to do. They didn't need to, revert back to the 90s and blow people off the ball and make these 500-yard rushing games. They didn't need to do that, but the fact that they were able to even just make a slight improvement, we hit 400 yards on the ground. That's incredible. Anyways, as I predicted as well, Martinez had a stellar day. He did have a few mistakes, so we'll get to those first and then come back to his positives. He did have, on the first play of the game, he kind of launched one down to Toure, and he was supposed to throw it over the safety that had dropped down, but he didn't quite get enough on the ball, and it looked like it was going to get picked off, but Toure made a great play on the ball, and he cut across and grabbed it and made a 70-yard gain out of it. Toure kind of bailed him out on that. It was going to be an interception, but I don't know if he misread that the safety dropped down further than he did or that he misread his ability to throw it over the safety's head. But either way, he got bailed out. It didn't happen, and that's kind of been a thing too. People have been saying that we need the ball to bounce our way, start bouncing our way. We just need one play to kind of kick the momentum off. First play of the game could have been a disaster. It turns out to be a big play. That was the spark we needed. That was what kind of carried us through the game. So he didn't get enough on it. Would have been picked, turned into a 70-yard gain. Then a few plays later, he runs it in for a touchdown. Adrian does. He does also have a poor pitch later on. He feels some pressure. He pitches it out a little off balance. I believe it was to Betts, but luckily that rolled out of bounds. We did lose some yards on that, but then we ended up recouping and making a drive out of it. He did have a couple passes that were too high as well. That seems to be his one big criticism. But a couple high passes out of a great game that he had otherwise I'm not going to knock him for that. He really settled in after that almost pick, and he had an outstanding game. He went 11 for 17 for 202 yards, 1 touchdown in the air, and he had 3 rushing touchdowns that were all in the first quarter. Those are career highs for him, the 3 rushing touchdowns and the 4 total touchdowns. That's an incredible first half. I mean, I don't know that he got the air touchdown. I think the air touchdown came in the third quarter, but either way, like he got pulled out halfway through the third. We were doing so well, and he had put the team in such a position to win. It was just a dominating first half. While he was in, the drives averaged 2 minutes and 2 seconds, and 7 of the 8 drives that he took command of were touchdowns. He didn't force the ball anywhere. That was something that I think the commentators had mentioned, and that was something that a lot of people are noticing now. He wasn't trying to force the ball anywhere. He wasn't launching the ball besides that first one. He was trying to spread the defense out a little bit, but he didn't force the ball where it needed to go. He didn't feel this extra stress to make a play out of nothing. He was just taking what the defense was giving him. If everything was covered, he took off and run. If there was somebody down short, he would toss it off to him. If there was somebody open, but it wasn't going to be a first down, he would still check it off. He was just taking what was open, what was available, and that was all we needed him to do, and that was all the offense really needs to keep moving the chains. Arguably, you could say that he's the best dual threat quarterback in the country, for sure the Big Ten. I don't think you can argue. Sean Clifford's not dual threat so much, but Sean Clifford's probably the only other quarterback in the Big Ten that I would say is the best quarterback overall. Adrian isn't known for his, pocket passing and stuff, but he also hasn't had a pocket to prove that in either. At his current pace, though, he could be, I was looking through the stats, at the current pace that he's running with his average total offense per game, he could potentially be Nebraska's all-time total offense leader by the end of the year. He needs like 1,400 yards. I think that averages out to like 220 yards per game, and he's hitting 250 per game. So at his current pace, he could be the all-time leader at Nebraska. So I'm not sure how there's still so many Adrian Martinez haters out there when he has done so much in the 4 years that he's been here. That's including a shortened season last year. But like I said, he came in, we dominated the first half. He came in for half of the third quarter, and that allowed Logan Smothers to come in. Logan Smothers had about a quarter of play, and then Matt Masker came in for the last half of the fourth quarter. So everybody got play. I like the fact that we're giving these backups time in game to play just in case something were to happen, whether that be on the offensive line, whether that be with Martinez, anything really. The defense kind of stayed in because the defense is solid, but the offense had a lot of swapping going on in the second half, so that's nice to see. Altogether, we had 11 different players make receptions on the night. There was nobody that had more than 2 receptions, but the fact that we were able to spread it out so wide just shows that we have so many different options as well. A lot of scheming going on. And like I mentioned, in the second half, we were bringing in a lot of second, third string guys too that typically wouldn't see the ball. But like I said, again, most of our yards came on the ground anyway. It was the second most rushing yards in Big Ten history, let alone Nebraska history, at 434 yards. The Jaquez Yant came in for 13 carries, and he had 127 yards on the 13 carries. I think that's like 10 average or whatever. But he had one big busted 64-yard run where he like stiff-armed some dude. He did that multiple times where he was stiff-arming dudes, but he's just a big man. It was the longest run from scrimmage from a running back this season. That was nice to see. He is a big guy, but he still has some speed and smoothness to him, and it was nice to see a different guy come in. I like Ramir Johnson. He fights hard. He shoots hard. He runs through the gaps really hard, but you need a guy like Yant sometimes too that can just blow people over. And the fact that he has the speed, I didn't know he was as fast as he was, but he looked good running that 64 yards. But I like that 1-2 punch also. I like the fact that you can bring in Yant for these hard yardage gains, but then also have the ability, he's versatile enough to kind of jump out and make these big busted plays. But Ramir Johnson's kind of the speedy back as well. So they both run hard. They both run fast. They both have good vision. They also brought Betts in on a jet play. I think it was like a fake option. It didn't look like he was ever going to hand the ball off, but it was supposed to look like the triple option. But Adrian pitched out to Betts, and Betts was already at full speed, and he turned the jets on and was gone. It was like 83 yards. That was beautiful. You have to watch it. It was so smooth. Betts never got touched. Vokalek who was it? Vokalek, Allen, and I'm not sure who the third one blocking on the outside. They sealed the edge, and it was gone. Nobody touched him. It was just so beautiful to see. I'll try to get these videos up too. But like I mentioned, the blocking on the outside had a big part to do with it. The offensive line being able to hold that play, where it needed to be so that Adrian can get the pitch out and Betts can get the hole to run through. All these things came together, and these are the types of things you're going to see. You're going to see big busted run plays. You're going to see these 83-yard touchdown, jet sweeps. It wasn't a jet sweep, but people have been waiting for that for Xavier Betts to come in and do something like that. The team, as an average, we averaged 8.1 yards per rush. That's not something we've been seeing a lot this year, but that's obviously very nice. I mentioned that Northwestern's defense isn't great, but Pat Fitzgerald also, he's good at planning. So, it's not like we went against FCS school. It's not that terrible, but I think that we finally clicked on all cylinders, and Northwestern was just happened to be the person we run over to get there. 657 total yards was the most given up by Northwestern since 2005, and Pat Fitzgerald arrived in 2006. So that's the most yards that Pat Fitzgerald's defense has given up since he's arrived there. We had more than 400 yards going into halftime. I think we were up 34-7 at that point as well. 5 red zone touchdowns. That's been a really big critique as well of the Huskers, is that we get in the red zone and we can't make anything happen because we can't run the ball, because the offensive line can't hold anything. We had 5 of them, all of them on the ground. We were able to run the ball, and that makes such a drastic difference as far as the red zone goes. Now we get to look over to the defense. So the defense did have, they held them to 7 points. So obviously it wasn't like anything terrible. It was a bend, don't break, certainly, though. I was a little concerned with the deep passes. There was a couple different passes where, one, the quarterback was playing great. Ryan Helinski came in and he played very good. He went 25 for 39, 256 in the air, and 1 touchdown. He did almost get picked off a couple times, and both of them happened to be Reimer. Reimer jumped up and he had both hands on it, but he couldn't come down with it. Another one, he had Ben Stilley got a hand up and deflected the ball, and it kind of shot right into Reimer's chest, and he just didn't pull it down. He should have had that one. Out of the 2, I think he should have had that one. He should have kept that one. But anyway, looking at the run defense is kind of what they've been known for the last few games, being able to shut down Michigan State's running back, and he had another good week this week after they played us. So, I thought maybe the running back just maybe was a little overhyped, but the fact that he was able to have a good season before us and after us kind of shows that our run defense is no joke. We held Northwestern to 37 total rushing yards. They had 1.4 yards per rush. They came in averaging 214 yards rushing. That's kind of incredible that you're able to shut down multiple teams that are known for running the ball, and you're able to shut them down hard. That's something we're going to need going forward in the Big Ten, because a lot of teams are able to run the ball, and that kind of sets up the rest of their offense. If you're able to shut down the run game, it kind of disrupts everything else. So looking at Jojo Doman had a big day. He had a career day, if you want to look at it that way. He had 9 tackles, 2 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, and 2 forced fumbles. That is quite the stat sheet. Him and DeAndre Thomas came in on a dual blitz that it was like on the 1 yard line. They had driven it down the field. They had got down to the 1 yard line, tried to QB sneak in, didn't quite get there. So then the next down, DeAndre Thomas and Jojo Doman came in on a dual blitz off the corners, and they hit the running back as he was getting the ball from the quarterback, fumbled it, and DeAndre Thomas recovered it. It was beautiful to watch. It was one of those plays that just as it unfolds, like you see them shooting in, there's nobody touching them, they didn't get blocked, and they're back to the quarterback before the quarterback even gives it to the running back. That's the ideal blitz that you can have, and it was just beautiful to watch. But Jojo had a big day. DeAndre Thomas had a big day. A lot of the defensive guys had big days. It wasn't all focused on one area. Everybody played well, with the exception of maybe the corners getting burned a few times. But overall, we played consistently. They didn't have the best day, but I think we came into this game probably assuming that they were going to run the ball a lot, and the corners probably were more prepped for keeping the runs down, keeping these big runs from exploding out past the secondary. So maybe that's why they were kind of shooting lower instead of keeping up with these speed guys on the outside. I'm not sure. But you have to give credit to Helinski. He came in. This was his first full start at Northwestern, and he played well. He was putting the ball right where it needed to be. He made some amazing passes, and the wide receivers made some amazing grabs as well. Flipping over to special teams, I mentioned they were limited. We didn't kick any field goals, but Connor Culp went 8 for 8 on point afters. So that's something. Pristup also had one punt and it went 84 yards, as I mentioned. That is a long way. 20 yards of that probably was rolling, but that was probably also the loudest that I heard Memorial Stadium get. As the ball was rolling, the closer it got to the end zone, the closer it got to like that 10-yard mark, the crowd just progressively got louder and louder and louder. And that's because the special teams has been such an Achilles heel for the team that you're excited when it works really well. You keep hearing that these punters can really boot it in practice, but they're just not transferring it to the game. And I mean, to his credit too, his heels were probably right on the end zone. It wasn't like a no pressure punt. It was a very pressure punt. But he punted it from one end zone to the other, and it was amazing to watch. And he was amazing to watch afterwards. Just the hype and the energy he was feeling, like that has to feel good to have a really, really poor performance the week before, and then to come out and tie the second longest punt in Huskers history. 84 yards is a hell of a boot, and he didn't get a whole lot of chances, but the one chance that he did get, he really capitalized on it. Oliver Martin was back also to field punts. He played in the Illinois game. I think, from what I've heard, Oliver Martin was our first guy. Cam Taylor was our second guy. And then I'm not sure who they had as the third, like, return man after that. Probably Toure, since he came in. But Toure doesn't really have experience returning the ball from punts or kickoffs. It doesn't matter. He did it in high school a little bit, but he never did it in college at Montana. So he doesn't have a ton of experience doing that. But Oliver Martin was our guy back there, and then he got injured, and then Cam Taylor had his issues. So Toure was doing it, but like I said, he didn't have experience, so he didn't know whether to come up for it, whether to go back for it. So he was letting a lot of these roll, and so we were losing a ton of yardage just on that. Scott Frost mentioned it last week. But Oliver Martin comes in, and he didn't actually have any returns, but he fair caught the ones that he could fair catch. There was even one that was kind of squirrely at the end where he kind of like had to weave through some of the block guys, but he still caught it. No mistakes. That's all we need from the special teams at this point. But looking forward, what does the win-loss mean for this team? Scott Frost wanted to keep the team grounded in the postgame. He did see a lot of things that he liked. He did see a lot of positives, but he didn't want the team to get too big, to stroke their ego too much and get them soft for next week. He said, this is how the team is supposed to look. This is exactly what he wanted. This is exactly what the team could look like if the offensive line and the special teams gaffes hadn't happened. This is how the team would look all the time if these little mistakes would get corrected. And hopefully now that we see what a good game can look like, what it looks like when you play well, this will be the new norm. From what he saw from the offensive line to Yant, overall it was a great performance, but he did mention it's one game. It's one good game. We can't let people blow up Yant to be the next Rozier and the offensive line to be the pipeline. Like, that's not how it is right now. They need to put that over multiple games, multiple seasons for you to start making those comparisons. But he did like what he's seen. But he did say that he watched Michigan earlier in the day, and he's like, it's going to be a tough week of practice. We're going to have to practice good coming into this game. I watched, after I looked at the stats and watched the game back on YouTube, Wisconsin just got manhandled. Michigan's defense is like crazy. They are hunting the ball at all times. They're no joke. So he's not wrong. We're going to have a good week of practice because Michigan's going to come in here and it's going to be a huge game. He after Scott Frost talked, Adrian Martinez talked, a couple of linemen talked, and Jacques Yant talked as well. But they mentioned that the past 2 weeks outcomes has been used as motivation in this game, and they were tired of getting so close but never coming away with a win. The whole team was kind of feeling that way. So they used those last 2 weeks as motivation, and this is the outcome we get. So this is a big win for the program. Northwestern was wounded, as I mentioned, but it's still Northwestern. It's still a Big Ten team, and they're still in our conference. So this is all-around great performance, offense, defense, limited special teams as it was. Still, everybody played well. Everybody had the same goal in mind. This is pretty hard to argue that it wasn't best overall performance in Scott Frost's tenure here at Nebraska, and arguably this is what it should look like. I think that's something that a lot of people don't take into consideration when they're so critical of Frost and how his record is right now. I think the first 2 years he truly thought that he could bring Oregon's offense to Nebraska. But once he got here and seen the defenses in the Big Ten and the way that it was going to play out every game, you've seen it by the way that he called the offense. He was doing this fast tempo offense that was killing his defense essentially because he wasn't giving them the time to rest. So he was going out there getting a 3 and out in a minute and then sending his defense back out there over and over and over again. And the defense would just get tired out by the end of the half and just get blown out. You don't see that anymore. There's been a big shift on Scott Frost, whether that be the size that he's bringing in, whether that be the personnel that he's putting out there. You see a different offense that Scott Frost came in with as opposed to what you see now. And he's still scheming. He's still very much implementing plays that I haven't seen before. He's being very innovative in the different option plays that he's bringing in. But I think that that's something that people don't give him credit for. So I think if you look at the first 2 years, I think that was the trial period for him where he finally realized after that second year that this isn't going to work. Last year was the weird season for everybody involved, but last year was kind of the transition to start moving in this direction. I think this year was supposed to be the first year that he's going to... I felt like this was the first year that he's actually started playing games and coaching games like a Big Ten coach. I feel like the games before this, he's been trying to play this high-fly offense and speed, just get big, powerful guys on the line, but everything else was speed. But that's just not how the Big Ten's going to work. They're not going to let you get away with that every game. This isn't the same opponent pool that you're going to play at UCF or Oregon. And he realized that. That's why I've been graceful with giving him the time to learn. This is only his second head coaching job. He doesn't have a ton of experience. And I think that this is also a little bit how Tom Osborne was. He didn't win these big games because he was still learning, but they gave him this grace period. I'm not making the comparison to Scott Frost and Tom Osborne as far as their records go. Obviously, that speaks for itself. But the fact that we gave both coaches time to learn and they paid us back for it. I'm hoping that's what happens with Scott Frost. As you see, his stuff will work as long as the execution is down. So I was extremely happy, but I won't say that I was surprised just because I harp on the fact that we have so much potential every game, and it's just a few key things that go wrong, and it just lets the team down. It kind of deflates that balloon, but you see the potential every time, and tonight we just got way closer to the max potential that we have. You just needed a spark to set off that powder keg, and the offensive line made a big difference. That was all you needed. You just needed the one spark, and everything kind of got glued together, and it worked just fine. But looking forward, like I mentioned, we have top 10 Michigan team coming in. They murdered Wisconsin on national TV. It was horrendous to watch. But after watching this full team performance, I initially, after I looked up the Wisconsin and Michigan game, watched Michigan's defense and watched the fact that it wasn't just Michigan's defense that won the game. Michigan's offense looks really good too. I was scared. I was afraid for the offense and the defense. For Nebraska, I said we are going to have a bad game next week. It's not bad as in performance, bad as in Michigan's just really good. After watching us this week and seeing that with the changes to the offensive line making that big of a difference and the confidence that the team is playing with now, and seeing that they are capable of putting a complete performance together, I no longer feel fear. It wasn't fear. Anxiety maybe. So I'm no longer feeling the anxiety. I'm more now feeling excitement. I'm excited for the fact that the atmosphere here at Memorial Stadium for another night game with a Big Ten opponent coming in, a top 10 Big Ten opponent coming in, and it's going to be a primetime game. It was huge for Northwestern. I can't even imagine how many people switched their ringtones to Thunderstruck after the light show that they put on. That was beautiful. I have that as my desktop wallpaper now. That red image of the stadium, just blood red. It was beautiful. But it's going to be a big opportunity for the Huskers to put a stamp on the season. We had that big of a atmosphere and energy for Northwestern. Now you get to play a big time, big boy opponent. And I'm excited to see if the Huskers can prove themselves to the nation at this point, because everyone's going to look at this game and be like, Northwestern's a terrible team, probably the worst team in the Big Ten. This is a nothing game. Now we get a chance to prove it. So we'll get into more of that on Wednesday, though, for another pregame analysis. Until then, we will wrap up this recap. How are you feeling now that we have hit the halfway mark? We are halfway to the 6 wins we need for the bowl game, but we're 6 games into the season. So comment below on what you think find me on Twitter at Cobsmacked Pod and let me know there. But until next time, go Big Red.